Just as a reminder to everyone, again, muting your mics. So let's get started. Thank you again for joining us today for CTE Advocacy 101. My name is Celia Loomis. I'm the Digital Media Coordinator here at ACTE. And joining us today with our presentation is Alicia Hyslop. She is the Director of our Public Policy Department here at ACTE. Brendan DeSetti, a Legislative Liaison. Mitch Kopis, he is also a Legislative Liaison. And Sean Lynch, who is our Media Relations Manager. So without further ado, Alicia, if you want to just take it away, and I will be controlling the slides going back and forth.
Okay, thank you, Celia, and thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon to talk about advocacy, a subject that is critical to the future of CTE, not only at the federal level where we at ACTE work primarily, but also at the local and state levels as well. As we get started this afternoon, we would love to know a little bit more about who's on today's webinar. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself in the chat window of WebEx, it's over on the right-hand side down towards the bottom of your screen, just who you are and where you're from, maybe what role you play in the CTE system. That would help us to make sure we meet everybody's needs and know who's interested in this topic moving forward. So to get started, this is CTE Advocacy 101. So we're going to start with some very basic information about what is advocacy. And I think sometimes advocacy can get confused with lobbying, and some people think advocacy is only on the political side or only on the federal level. But one of the things that we hope to do here today is to explain some concepts that can be applicable not just to federal policy, but across the spectrum. The Merriam-Webster definition of advocacy is merely, the process of supporting a cause or proposal, somebody who works on behalf of a cause or argues for or supports a cause. I like the argue for part of that definition. It implies action on behalf of an advocate. And so you might apply advocacy and your advocacy skills to any number of causes or proposals or policies. It might be for CTE broadly or for one specific initiative at your local level. Maybe you're advocating on behalf of your particular CTE program, or all the way up to a piece of federal legislation. A question we often get asked is, why is advocacy important, and what difference does it make if one person is involved or not? And that's another key point that we want you to keep in mind, is that your advocacy is very critical to our efforts at the federal level. It really takes the entire CTE community working together to make an impact on the future of CTE and CTE policy. Celia, can we go to the next slide? So great. So one of the reasons that personal advocacy on the ground is so important is that today's education policy environment is often very divisive. Lots of debates going on about standards and assessments and appropriate school improvement strategies, and we really want to send a positive message on behalf of CTE to break through all of the divisiveness, all of the negativity surrounding a lot of the education policy debate. And we have seen time and time again that just one interaction can impact a policymaker, whether that be a member of Congress or someone at the state level. All it takes is them visiting one school or talking to one person that has an interest in and a passion for talking about CTE to impact that member of Congress. And then once you even go further than that and build a relationship with a member of Congress, you can accomplish so much more of the things that we want to accomplish for our students. Another reason that it's critical to us to have members out in the field and those interested in CTE from a wide variety of viewpoints taking action is that you can make all of the statistics and numbers and that we use at the federal level real. We don't have, individual students here in Washington on a regular basis. We we invite them to participate in the process whenever we can, but we can't tell those personal stories, those success stories that you on the ground can tell policymakers. And then finally, the bottom line is that hearing from a constituent generates much more urgency on the part of a policymaker than hearing from a lobbyist or another representative of a national or even a state-level organization like ACTE or your state association. So it's very important to have all of our voices working together. You have expertise that we at the national level can't replicate on the large scale that our members can. And we have just a quick cartoon to illustrate kind of the fundamental aspect of advocacy or of lobbying, as this cartoon shows, is that we want to show policymakers the value of our programs. That's really what all of the information that you'll get this afternoon is about, is how to take what we know is true about CTE, the impact we have on students and on communities, and show federal policymakers and state policymakers and local policymakers that those values are real and tangible and that they deserve their attention and investments moving forward. So we have a number of topics we're going to go through today, and one of the things that we want to make sure to point out, and different pieces of the presentation will fit each of these different audiences, is that there's a wide variety of stakeholders that you should involve in any advocacy activities, starting with policymakers certainly, but also business leaders, media outlets, parents. They're critical to getting and keeping support for our programs, and then others in your community. And many of the strategies that we'll share are applicable not just to policymakers, but to these other audiences as well. So as we go through today, as mentioned, we have 3 of our other staff members who will be presenting different sections of the presentation. Brendan will be up first, talking about impacting policymakers. Sean is going to cover public awareness and media relations. And then finally, Mitch is going to talk about how you can advocate for CTE during the election cycle that is upon us this year. Before I turn it over to Brendan, I just want to mention one event that we would love to have you follow up and attend if you're interested in advocacy and in learning more about public policy. I want you to save the dates for next year's National Policy Seminar. Yes, there we go. There's National Policy Seminar March 2nd through 4th, 2015. That's here in the Washington, D.C. area in Arlington, Virginia, and we provide much more in-depth advocacy as well as updates on public policy. So save the date and be on the lookout for more information about NPS coming soon. And now I will turn it over to Brendan to get started.
Thanks, Alicia. My name is Brendan DeSetti. I'm one of the legislative liaisons here at ACTE. One of the first things I wanted to share with you or to types of communications or following up with policymakers. Top ways to follow are letters, email, telephone calls to their offices, and other types of face-to-face contact. We also have some advocacy tips you can see up there. It's really important to approach policymakers with information on your programs, including data on student involvement and the value that your programs are bringing to your programs, to your community. So what can we do when we have that type of information to advocate for our programs at home? So if you want to hit the next slide. One of the biggest and most effective ways for showing off our programs is to organize school visits for these different members of our community, policymakers and business leaders, to show them what we're doing. It's the most effective way to turn someone who maybe not care about CTE or doesn't know anything about CTE into an instant champion. So we really encourage people to do those types of events. I'm curious, though, if any of you have done school visits, hosted them for policymakers or business leaders. or the media, if you just use that chat box to say what you might have done or what policymakers you might have hosted at your school. We'd love to hear that. Some other ways, and Sean will talk a little bit more about op-eds and letters to the editor. Those are really great because our policymakers are constantly reading their hometown newspapers and taking clips from there to inform their legislative agenda. So anything that gets in there is going to be heard by those leaders on the federal level as well as the state level and by the rest of your community as well. A couple other things. We have phone campaigns and email letter campaigns. Those are effective if they're done consistently and en masse. They're great ways to really make a difference when timing is of the essence. If there are votes coming up, calling up your legislator or your business leaders or the media to get the issue out there is a great way to get that information out fast and make that matter. While we have a lot of policymakers at home this October, they're all campaigning. A lot of folks who are up for re-election are hosting listening sessions, town halls, other types of events around their districts and their states, and those are great areas that you can go in and listen to what they're saying, make an impact, ask questions, and see if you can get someone a policymaker to voice support for CTE, in which case that will make a difference to their work back here in Washington or at the state capitol building as well. So we at ACTE, we have some other ways that we try to make advocacy easy. I know that some of those are time-consuming activities when you're talking about organizing a school visit. Although very effective, it can be a time event. So we want to make it easy. We know that you guys are teachers, administrators. You have really busy schedules and full classrooms. So we have our CTE Action Center on our website that we put up different letters and talking scripts, talking points that you can use to reach out to your members of Congress. It takes 5 minutes to send a letter. All you need is your address, and we'll fill in the rest. You can see we have some things up there right now about building in our investment in CTE, ensuring that we are being properly funded, but you can go there. We also utilize those throughout our CTE Policy Watch blog, which you can see we have a new blog that we just launched recently. So as you're reading through those stories, you might see that we put up an action that you can take in one of those stories, just making it very easy for people to take actions. And you can also use that Action Center to drive your colleagues, your friends, your family members to go and take actions as well in support of CTE. One other area that I'll talk about is business advocacy. A lot of folks overlook the impact that businesses can play in advocating for CTE. We know that they rely on our programs for the future of their workforce, for ensuring that there's a skilled employee coming in and that they're not going to be forced with decisions on shutting down production lines or anything like that. And that makes a real powerful impact on policymakers who really look to businesses to inform their legislative efforts. So we really encourage you to utilize your business partnerships and other businesses who may not be involved in your program, but to be advocates for CTE, to see what you're doing and possibly do letters or make personal requests to legislators as well. Business sign-on letters are some of the most influential ways to show support. You do one letter and have multiple businesses sign on. It's a really effective tool. So with all those types of things that we can do, what would our advocacy goals be? Well, broadly, we want to educate our community and policymakers about what is CTE, what we're doing. We're not vocational education or dirty manufacturing anymore. We're high-tech, we're clean, we're preparing students to be college and career ready, and we want to use that education to increase their interest in our programs, in our policy issues. It's also really important to use this to set yourself up as an expert in education in CTE. The more you do that, the more folks are going to turn to you when they have a question. Policymakers are going to come to you to see what their legislation might be impacting at the local level or what's happening on the local level that they can help you with. That's really important as we're heading into a Perkins Career and Technical Education Act reauthorization. Then the third one is just building a relationship with our policymakers and local media. It's a lot easier to make an ask and make a request from someone you know than it is to ask someone you are unfamiliar with to really go out on a leap for you or to add $5 million to your program. So having that relationship and maintaining it over time is something we really want to encourage you to be focused on. It's not always about winning in the short term. We really want to think about what are the long-term effects of having a relationship, of having strong CTE champions in Congress, in the State House, at the local level that are going to be supporting our programs. Some specific messages we should be carrying right now to our members is how critical Perkins CTE Act is for education and for job training programs in our communities. We really need to be sure that we're stressing that funding cuts are unacceptable. We've taken, $140 million in cuts from Perkins since 2010. We took some cuts during sequestration, and we cannot afford to fund these high-quality programs to ensure we have a future skilled workforce if we continue to take these cuts. And we need to back up those points using data and success stories from our programs, ensuring that when we're making that request, we're showing them why it's important to make that investment. And again, explain that without federal support and investing in our programs, they're just not possible. So as you're doing some of these advocacy activities, reaching out to policymakers, we have resources for you. If you're ever looking for statistics, for national views on things, we have our ACTE Advocacy Toolkit on our website, which offers a lot of good tips on discussing things with policymakers, with media folks, organizing site visits, different activities like that. We also have some great advocacy tips in our Techniques magazine from March 2014. And if you're interested in hearing from an educator, an administrator on the ground on some advocacy work they did, the May 2014 Techniques magazine has a great article from an administrator in Illinois who built a relationship with his policymaker and has been able to make great inroads in CTE policy there. We also have our Policy Watch blog, and we have that divided into categories. So if you're interested in certain policy issues or just certain research issues, you can go to our Policy Watch blog through our website and get lots of great tips there. We also have some great issue sheets that you can use as handouts when you're hosting these types of visits or outreach activities. And the last thing I'll mention, last couple of things I'll mention is we have our, coming soon I should say, we're launching our ACTE Action Network. If any of you are interested in taking part in back home activities, but you're looking for a little assistance or direction, we'll be launching this network of folks that you can sign up to volunteer, and we will reach out to you with tips and advice on who to invite, how to invite them, what activities you should be holding or participating in. It's not necessarily just school visits, but events you could be visiting as well, so be on the lookout for that. And the last thing I'll mention is for those of you who are very active in advocacy and making a difference in CTE policy, we have created 2 new awards recently to recognize your efforts. The first one, so if you go to the next slide, the first one is our e-advocate recognition program, which is for folks who take those quick actions that I was showing you earlier. We'll be recognizing our top 5 e-advocates on a regular basis and certainly at our national policy seminar as well. So I encourage you to take those quick actions, less than 5 minutes per one. You can do 1 per day, and we'll be recognized on our website and in other areas. The other one is our Baird English Advocate of the Year Award, which is for folks who are hosting site visits, who are maintaining relationships with their policymakers, doing phone calls, in-person meetings, things like that, who are really making a difference in CTE. We'll be looking for folks who are doing a tangible impact, and you can find out more information about those on our website, acteonline.org/action. And with that, I will hand it over to Sean, who will talk a little bit more about public awareness and media relations.
Thank you so much, Brendan, and thank you everybody for joining us. As Brendan said, my name is Relations Manager here at the Association for Career and Technical Education. Celia, if you want to jump to the next slide for me. Thank you. In this role, I get to wear a lot of hats, which is a lot of fun for me and keeps me very busy. I work hard to keep ACTE sort of in the news and keep people aware about what we're working on. And doing so, I share press releases, statements, media advisories, other things like that with reporters to ensure that we're sort of on their radar screen and that they're aware of what's going on in career and technical education. I also respond to those media inquiries, and I act as a spokesperson for the association. And I work for our members to make sure that they are aware of what the coverage of career and technical education is across the country and in their local papers. We can jump ahead. ACTE has a very comprehensive media strategy. We try to work with both local and national publications to make sure that coverage is showing that more modern image of career and technical education that Brendan described. A lot of people are not exactly sure what today's CTE classroom looks like, so we make sure that those publications are sharing the most up-to-date information and that policymakers and the public have a clear view of what that classroom looks like. We also work with other organizations to make sure that they are on the same page as us and that the public has a comprehensive understanding of what ACTE is working on. And we're lucky because we work in a very unique space. ACTE is one of the national authorities on career and technical education. So we get to work with a lot of publications because if they have any questions about CTE, we've worked very hard to position ourselves as the authority on that. You want to jump ahead, Celia? So in your own media outreach and in your own advocacy, you should, as Brendan alluded to earlier, make sure that you are having a very clear picture of your goals and what you hope to achieve. If you want to share information about CTE, you should think about 3 different audiences. And some of these are going to overlap, as you can see in the lower right-hand corner. If you're working with local communities and parents, you might want to just tell them about a program that exists and raise enrollment or raise awareness about maybe a cool project that they worked on. If you're working with the media specifically, it's going to be a sort of sounding board for the general public, but it's also going to influence their future coverage of CTE issues, so it's important to be communicating with them clearly. And you can use the media to communicate with policymakers to, as Brendan said, influence their decision-making and make sure that they have a clear picture of what their constituents need. When you're working with reporters, it's important to keep in mind that they sort of live deadline to deadline. And for that reason, you have to sort of communicate why you feel that there's an impetus for this now. So there's a few different talking points that we've worked with that have been successful in the past. One of them is that our economic recovery is integrated with our workforce readiness and bridging that skills gap, and that has really moved CTE up on the agenda. So we're seeing more independent reporter interest in our issues. They're coming to us and asking about this new thing that they've heard of, and we sort of do bring them up to speed of what vocational education has really grown into. To that point, we do need to work proactively to overcome some of the stigma that surrounds CTE. A lot of people have an outdated notion that CTE is for second-rate students, and ACTE has worked really hard with its members' help to raise an understanding that today's CTE classroom is not only for students who are good with technical skills or like to work with their hands, but it's also good for students who are really successful in the academic coursework and who are college-bound. We also work really hard to raise awareness among policymakers and among people from other organizations about the importance that CTE has in every student's education, whether that's a college-bound or a career-bound student. You want to jump ahead? So when you're working to communicate a message to members of the media, it's important to consider the different vehicles that are available to you to achieve those goals. There are a number of different options available to you, and they all have their own sort of unique flavor and strategies that are required to work with them. But you can really, any way that you would get your news, there's somebody who's overseeing that. So that could be online, That could be in print media, that could be working with TV stations. But when you're trying to consider which vehicle you should use, you should spend some time thinking about the time restraints that you're going to have, because some of them are going to require significantly more lead-up or planning. You should consider, and very realistically consider, the amount of resources that you have to contribute to that. And you should consider how complicated or controversial your message might be. If you are working with maybe something that's a complex technical issue, social media might not be the best outlet for you, but maybe you do have significantly more leeway to communicate that message through print media. So just spend some time considering the strategy that you're going to use for that. We want to jump ahead? You should also consider how broad your audience is going to be. A lot of people are not as inclined to work with online news media because they just don't feel that it has the same impact that maybe print would. But as you can see here, that's changing rapidly. And so just spend time thinking about how you want to reach your audience and how many people you're going to be able to impact through your outreach. Want to jump ahead? Now, using the example of, say, working with a school visit, there's a few different vehicles that are involved with traditional media outreach, so we'll walk through those very quickly. A media advisory would go out before your news. So if you've got a school visit planned, you would send one of these to reporters a couple of days before the event, up to a week prior, and you'd use that to get onto a reporter's calendar. It doesn't have to be too extensive. ACTE has a number of templates for these documents available on our website, and you can use those to craft your own media advisory, which really just lets the reporter know where and when they need to be there. The press release would go out after your event, so in the example of a school visit, you would say if somebody important was at the event, if a certain number of community members were able to join you for it. And those are used to get a reporter's attention and really spur them to write that article about your event or provide you with the coverage that you need. And it'll also influence maybe the lens that they use to examine the issue. And finally, remember to use social media as a vehicle to communicate with members of the media. You could use a hashtag for your event. You could tweet at a reporter if you've already written a press release and put it on maybe your school or a community website. That's going to build a relationship with the reporter, and it's going to meet them in a space where they're comfortable. Reporters are very active on social media. They often use Twitter hashtags to identify sources and do their research, so that's certainly a component of any robust media strategy. If you want to jump ahead. Perfect. And when you're going to work with reporters, there are 3 rules that you need to remember. You need to come prepared to your event. You need to consider any previous coverage that you've seen in that media outlet of CTE issues or of your program. And that way you can have sort of a foundation and understanding with the reporter of where they're at. You should also make sure that you come prepared with updated information, so enrollment in programs, postgraduate success rates or success stories, if that is something that you have available to you. Those sorts of things are always crucial if you're going to be working with a reporter, just so that you're able to respond to their questions effectively. Be sure to spend time tailoring your message and communicating to them why they care. Every news media outlet is working with a finite amount of space, and so you're going to need to make sure that you are pitching to them why your CTE program warrants coverage in their outlet. And make sure that you're building a relationship with them. If a reporter works effectively with you on one story, maybe send them a thank you follow-up email, reach out to them in the future if there are overlap and outreach. Julia, if you want to move to the next slide, please. ACTE is also together in our advocacy center area. If you go to ACTE's Action Center, you can look up reporters based on your community, and you can identify them by outlet or by subject area, and you can always reach out to me because I am always happy to help people with identifying the best reporter for their message. Next slide. When you're doing initial outreach to a reporter, like I said, just remember to relay the importance of your program to your local economy and connect it to the larger issue of workforce readiness. Be sure to include a little bit of bragging. Reporters like to see achievements and hear success stories from the CTE community. And if you feel it is appropriate, be sure to invite them to tour your program if you're having a school visit. If you plan to have a policymaker come to your school, it's always worth asking a reporter if you can get on that calendar and get coverage for that to maximize the opportunity. Next. Sometimes reporters will come to you, often after they've seen coverage maybe of your program or if they're just writing an article about CTE in general. And it's always good to just sort of go over the basics of reporter interactions because a lot of people do get a little bit nervous when working with reporters. So the first one is remain calm. A lot of people tend to talk fast or get a little flustered when they're working with a reporter because they know that pencil is writing down what they say. But remember that you're the expert, so just stay calm, provide a professional demeanor, and put your best foot forward. Sometimes reporters will ask you questions that you don't know the answer to, and there's nothing wrong with saying that you don't know. There are additional resources, and ACTE's got a wealth of information on our website and in our Action Center that you can refer them to. And be sure that to remember that you can refer them to another person if you don't know the answer to that specific question. So maybe if you don't know the exact number of students enrolled in your program, you could refer them to your school's administrator if they might be able to answer that question. Finally, this should go without saying, but it never hurts to repeat. Be sure to maintain your proper ethics and professional conduct. So don't lie or ever make anything up. Reporters have made a living out of telling the truth, and so they tend to keep digging when they feel like something doesn't make sense. Next. There are other opportunities other than just working with reporters individually to communicate the value of your CTE program. Two of those that are really effective are op-eds and letters to the editor. ACTE works regularly to identify opportunities and to place these publications in, or excuse me, these pieces in publications. So an op-ed would be a little bit longer option for you. This would express your opinion on an issue. So ACTE recently published an op-ed in Education Week about the importance of Congress passing Perkins Reauthorization Act. You have to make sure that this is going to connect with their audience, and it's going to cover the issue in a comprehensive and concise way. But it is going to be just a little longer than your letter to the editor. Letters to the editor respond to specific articles. So maybe you saw coverage of an education issue in your local publication and you felt that they left something out. This would be a perfect way for you to provide that sort of input and to just make sure that the publication's readers got the accurate information. Another option would be to organize an editorial board meeting. Those are a great opportunity to meet your reporters face-to-face because you can invite them to either come to your school for a school visit or you can bring information about your local CTE program to the reporter and meet with them on their own turf. And finally, don't forget that February is CTE month. This year's theme is Recognizing Classroom Innovators, and you can learn more about that at www.ctemonth.org. And now I'm going to hand things over to Mitch. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Sean. So this last section we're going to cover today is probably the most topical right now, which is advocating for CTE in an election year. I think it goes without saying that elections do have consequences. They affect the policies that are created, the legislation that gets voted on and passed, becomes law, and the funding decisions that affect all of our CTE programs. Just because Congress and state legislatures and governors are in campaign mode right now doesn't mean that we don't have an opportunity to further our advocacy goals when it comes to policy. and more broadly to spread awareness about the role of CTE in some of the general issues that are going to be at play during this election year, stuff like jobs, economic recovery, the skills gap, education generally. CTE has a component in all of those issues that are going to be part of the national discussion in this election. Slide, please. So first off, I'll give you the kind of state of play in terms of this year's election. It is a midterm election year for Congress. In November, you'll be selecting the Congress for the 114th Congress, which will officially begin in January. Why is that important? Well, the party that has the majority in the House or the Senate is going to drive the legislative agenda within that respective body. And in addition to that, controls a lot of the key leadership positions, not just the Speaker of the House or the Majority Leader, but also leadership positions, committee chairpersons on those committees that have jurisdiction over CTE or other education policy issues, education funding. The party that has that majority within that chamber is going to control those positions. Right now we have a divided Congress with Democrats making up the majority in the Senate, and in the House, Republicans have a pretty strong majority there, and that was a consequence of a midterm election in 2010, is when a wave of very conservative Republicans came into the House and took control from the Democrats there. And a lot of the sort of political backlog, the sort of partisanship that we've seen over these past 4 years or so now, has been a result of that 2010 midterm election. So midterm elections are very important. They don't always get as much attention as the presidential elections year, but they do have a big impact on the control of the both chambers on Capitol Hill. Just a little technical note, all 435 members of the House will be up for election this year, all 435 seats, I should say. Some will be returning members, some will be vacant seats that are going to see a freshman, a new member of Congress come in there. And they serve 2-year terms. In the Senate, it's a little bit different. They have staggered 6-year terms, so only 36 of those 100 seats will be up for grabs in 2014. Again, Election Day is on November 4th, so that's the kind of state of play with Congress. Next slide, please. In addition to our federal congressional elections, there are also statewide elections that you'll be seeing on the ballot. Probably the most notable will be governor's races. Not every state will be electing a governor this year, but a lot of them will be, 36 states in total. And governors play a big role as the chief executive for their state in setting that education and workforce agenda, and then work with their state legislatures to implement those CTE policies, and probably more importantly, establish funding, state-level funding for CTE programs as well. So that's kind of the important factor to consider in those elections. So in addition to the governor's races, there will also be, as I mentioned, state legislatures. Your state rep or your state senator will probably be on the ballot, as well as some other elected statewide offices. Sometimes election official or education officials are elected. It depends on your state. But at any rate, they will most likely be, if they are not elected, they're appointed by the governor. So there again, electoral politics kind of plays a role in setting policy going forward. Next slide, please. And then the third issue that I'll mention that you might see pop up on the ballot this year are state-level ballot initiatives, which are a little bit different than when you're just electing an individual to an office. In this case, you're being asked to sort of weigh in on a proposed change to state policy. The common types that you'll see are popular referendums. These generally come when you have the state legislator enacts a new law. It gets called up for referendum, so effectively the people then have veto power over it. They can determine whether or not they want to keep that law or throw it out. There have been a number of popular referendums related to education in recent years, so that might be something that comes up on your ballot this year. Similar to that are state constitutional amendments, amending your state's constitution to enact some kind of policy change. And bond funding issues or tax proposals. These occasionally come up at the state level. More likely you're to see these at the local level, something particular, if you're at the secondary level, something particular to your district, like a school levy or a bond issue for some kind of a short-term capital improvement project. You see those all the time on your ballots. Almost every election cycle, there's some kind of a local funding issue that pops up on the ballot. So those are probably a particular concern to a lot of folks in the CTE field because it has a direct impact on those local dollars. And I'll just mention that not every state utilizes or widely utilizes state ballot issues, so it's going to depend state to state, but it's worth checking out beforehand so that you're educated on what the issues are going into the polls on Election Day. Next slide, please. So with that being said, that's kind of the lay of the land in terms of the 2014 elections, but I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about actions that you can undertake as an individual or as a group advocating for CTE. These are some great kind of nonpartisan, and we want you to make sure to always stay nonpartisan in your election-related efforts. We are a nonpartisan organization. We don't support or oppose candidates for any kind of office, and we encourage you to be nonpartisan as well. So the first is probably the simplest, but in my opinion it's the most critical, which is registering to vote. You can't vote unless you are registered to do so. So today is actually National Voter Registration Day. It's a nationwide effort to raise awareness about that, the importance of getting registered to vote for this upcoming election. On the CTE Policy Watch blog, I posted a story about that this morning if you're interested in checking out more about National Voter Registration Day. So what kind of things can you do around registering to vote? Well, first of all, make sure you are registered and encourage others to do so as well. That includes your students. If you have students who are over 18, certainly make sure that they are going out and getting registered. We always bemoan the lack of turnout among young people in America. Well, it's a great opportunity to set an example and let them know that you're of age, that you should go out and get registered, point them to, places where they can get that form to register to vote, and encourage them to show up on Election Day. The other thing is making sure that you're up to date. This is one people often forget about. If you've changed your name, if you have moved recently, if any of your personal information has changed since the last election, that you need to contact your local board of elections and make sure that your registration is up to date so that you are not turned away on Election Day or have to cast a provisional ballot. Making sure that that is up to date is one that gets overlooked, but it can often be the most likely reason why you're not able to cast your ballot in some instances. And sometimes you can, if you choose to do so, conduct a voter registration drive of your own, and you can do this through your state association or, if you like, through one of your student organizations if you're a part of one of those. And it can be something as simple as just reminding everybody in the group to get registered to vote. And with technology, it's easier than ever. You can just send out a link to the state election website. They usually have the form you can print off, the voter registration form you can print off and mail in right from there. It's an easy way to just encourage and remind people that getting registered to vote is important. And be mindful also that there are voter registration deadlines, which vary from state to state. You want to look on your state election official's website to find the date that your registration deadline is this year. And then once everybody's registered, well, voter education is the next component of it. And this is, again, a pretty simple, some common sense issues, but they're ones that often get overlooked, making sure that people know, hey, November 4th is election day. If you haven't already had your primary election, and some states haven't, but most have, the general election, the big important date to remember is in November. And you can also help to educate yourself and educate others on what's going to be on the ballot. If you go to your county board of elections, they usually have a sample ballot that you can print out so you can see the offices that are up this year and all those ballot initiatives that will appear on there as well. So you can do your homework before you head to the polls. The other thing is to educate yourself and others as well on early voting options. You can vote by mail in some states, where you can request and receive an absentee ballot. Some states you have to have some kind of reason for not being able to show up on the polls on Election Day, but in a lot of states, like my home state of Ohio, there are no requirements for having an excuse. Anybody who is registered to vote can vote by mail, and that takes away a lot of the burden, a lot of the reasons why people don't show up on Election Day. They just don't have the time, or they forget about it. If you send in a request for an absentee ballot, they will send it to you, and then you can mail it in at your leisure. And then also there are other options for if you can't cast that absentee ballot. Some states allow early voting at a particular location, maybe the 3 Saturdays before Election Day, where folks who can't come out on November 4th are able to come and cast their ballot early. But again, that's not going to be in every precinct, so you'll usually have to go to a city building or a courthouse to cast that ballot. So that's another thing you want to be educate yourself on. Where are the locations for early voting options, and when are they? They are only specific times on specific dates. And again, contact your local Board of Elections to find that information about. Candidate engagement, if you so choose, you can host a candidate forum or candidate visit, again, through maybe your state association or student organization. You want to make sure to give equal time to both candidates, again, staying nonpartisan in this effort. Just give them an opportunity to come out and talk a little bit about the issues from both sides, and potentially take some questions and Q&A with the folks in your organization. You personally can also go out and attend a town hall or campaign event where you can ask questions about CTE issues of the candidates to just better inform yourself. And finally, get out the vote on Election Day. Just make sure that you go to the polls and encourage everybody else. It can be something as simple as just wearing that little sticker that says I voted today, just a reminder to folks that this is Election Day and you need to get out to the polls and cast your ballot. So those are the sort of, again, nonpartisan, easy kind of tactics that are really just about reducing those barriers that prevent people from going out and being an active participant in the electoral process. So can I have the last slide, please? So these are our resources, Election Watch 2014 on our website. You can see regular updates in this series on from now until Election Day and beyond on the CTE Policy Watch blog. You also see our special Election Watch page. The URL for that is right below, and then below that is Nonprofit Vote, which is another organization we partner with on voter engagement issues. Again, another nonpartisan group that just tries to actively promote engagement in elections and the electoral process. And we partner with them, and they are the ones that we get a lot of our resources on this issue from. Next slide. And this is our contact information, Alicia, Brendan, Sean, and myself. If you ever need to get a hold of us, fastest way is always email, and those are our email addresses. And I think with that, we're done with the presentation for today, and I think we'll take some questions now.
Everyone, also feel free to use the chat box if you'd like to ask a question. You're more than welcome to. We won't call out people on what questions they have, but again, feel free to use that if you guys would like to. Yes, actually, if you just want to, I can take your email now. If you want to leave your email in the box, you can send a private message to me. The question was if this PowerPoint was available, and yes, it is if you would like it. If there aren't any further questions, again, my name is Celia Loomis, and thank you for joining us today. I greatly appreciate it. Wait, we have one more question here. So this one goes out to our presenters. What is the most effective way to contact